Pivot tables are supposed to save you time, but most people use them like glorified calculators. If you're rebuilding your reports every Monday or manually calculating margins outside of your table, you're working for the data. The data isn't working for you. So today, we're ending the manual labor. I'm revealing the 5 secrets that turn a basic table into a fully automated command center. My name is Kyle, and I've spent my career streamlining data workflows. Let's stop clicking and start automating. All right, so up first, we're leaving the old world of writing formulas next to our pivot table. So if you add a profit column outside a table, it's gonna break immediately the moment you refresh. So let's go ahead and if I do like equals David's sum of sales minus his cost, we'll press enter. Great, we have $1,700. But if I add in a region filter and let's say I just wanna see for the East region, press okay, it just breaks automatically. So we wanna avoid that. We're gonna do a calculated field inside of our pivot table. So I'll go back to all. I'm gonna select inside my pivot table, and then under pivot table analyze, I'm gonna go ahead and select field items and sets, and then select calculated field. And then our field name will be profit, and then our formula will be our sales amount, insert that field, minus our cost amount, and we'll press okay. And then excellent, just like that, we have another column with the sum of product. And what's great about this is I can filter to any region and you can see it updates automatically. We essentially just built another field into our pivot table, but it is gonna be a calculated field. And you can do this for anything that you might want to. It is entirely dynamic. We're baking the math directly into the pivot tables engine so it stays dynamic no matter how much data that you end up adding. Up next is where most people get the slicer wrong. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna attach our slicer to multiple tables by hitting the report connections. So let's go ahead and take a look real quick in Excel. So as you can see here in Excel, I have multiple pivot tables, one with electronics, one with furniture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna insert in a slicer. I'm gonna go to pivot table analyze, insert in our slicer, and I'm gonna have this slice depending on the region, press okay. And then you can see I can press east and we see our table on the left will automatically update, but nothing's happening to the table on the right. So I'm gonna go ahead and right click into my slicer and select report connections. And then I'm gonna go ahead and select our second pivot table and then I'm gonna press okay. Excellent, and now you can see I can hit whatever region I want and you see our pivot tables will update automatically. And one click and our entire report will pivot in unison, which is fantastic. But you might have a question from your boss saying, hey, this looks great, but where did this number come in your pivot table? And we're not gonna go back to our raw data table. Instead, we're gonna use the pivot table secret door trick. You can double click any value and Excel instantly generates a new sheet with the exact line item that created the total. It's the ultimate audit tool and it takes exactly half a second. So looking at our pivot table, I see $4,050 for our sales amount for a pending order for Sarah. I'm gonna go ahead and double click that and see where that actually came from. And just like that, a new sheet is created with the details of the underlying data. So we can see that there were 2 order dates, one in April and then one in February in the South region for Sarah. Both are pending. This is super handy if you're in a meeting with your boss and they have questions about the data. You can instantly double click in your pivot table and it will create a new sheet for you that you can leverage with the answer. Historically, pivot tables hate text in the values area. Usually they just give you a count. But by adding this data to the data model, we can use a simple DAX formula to actually list out the names or status codes. Let's go ahead and take a look. So if we look at our pivot table, we see that for the month of March, we have all of our sales amounts and we have our count of order statuses, but you can see that they're just a count. I can't tell if they're fulfilled, if they're pending, or if they've even canceled. So to get this done, I have to go back to our data table and I'm gonna turn everything into a table with Control T and then select my table has headers and press OK. Then actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and insert a new pivot table. And the key here is that you have to select add this data to the data model and then press OK. All right, great. So I recreated my pivot table and what we're gonna do is we're gonna right click on our table right here and we're gonna go ahead and select add measure. And I'll bring this up real quick. So what we're gonna call this is order underscore status. In this line, it doesn't like spaces, so I'm using the underscore instead. And for our formula, we're going to use the concatenate X formula. Concat, and you see it right here, concatenate X, press tab, and then we're going to select our table, table 2, and then we'll press comma, and then our expression will be table 2, but it's going to be our order status. So I'll go ahead and select that real quick, and then I'll press comma, and then in quotations, I'm going to put a comma with a space and a quotations. And then go ahead and close out our formula. A pro tip here is that you can select check DAX formula, and this will check for any errors, which is fantastic, instead of getting that error box. You also want to make sure that the category is set to general, and then you can go ahead and press OK. And then what we did is we added a new field to our pivot table that we can go ahead and select. So I'm going to get rid of our count of order status and go ahead and add in our formula order status. And then excellent, just like that, you can see what we have underneath each sales rep. We see that Emily has a shipped option, Mike has a ship and a pending order, and then Sarah has 2 shipped orders underneath March. And then we can go ahead and select different months as well. And this is really powerful because your pivot table can now handle words, not just numbers. And now it's time for the final secret, the ghost update. So when you filter a table, categories with 0 values usually disappear, making your charts jump around and look broken. So by toggling show items with no data, your table structure stays locked and professional, even if the value is 0. It's the difference between an amateur sheet and a pro dashboard. All right, so back in Excel, you see I have my pivot table here and we are filtering based off of our order status. But as you can see, there's a lot of blank spaces and it's kind of hard to read. So I went to canceled, I kind of see this like scatter plot of all these different values. It can look a little less professional. So I'm gonna go ahead and right click and then select pivot table options. And then as you can see under format, we have the option for empty cells show, and it's currently blank. So what I'm gonna do is you can put in a dash and we press OK. And then you can see that all of our values now fill up with 0. And now it's a little bit cleaner to read, comparatively speaking, to just having blank values in our pivot table. And what's great about this too is that this stays locked. So no matter what I filter on, those zeros will automatically carry over into our pivot table as we filter and as we adjust our table. Congratulations, you just mastered the pivot table, but even the best table is useless if your raw data is a mess. So if you want to see how to clean 10,000 rows of messy data so it feeds perfectly into these tables, click the video right here and I'll see you over there.